This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 94. How much education do you need to become an entrepreneur? We'll share our thoughts. I'll also share my experience of working behind closed doors at a major university, what I learned from that and what you should know. That's coming up on this episode of the Red Podcast.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
David, I'm going to the Rockettes tonight.
So I hear.
I'm not very excited.
Well, there was a venue change.
I thought it was going to be downtown, which is pretty close to us, so it wasn't going to be such a big deal to get there. And then I learned it was going to be closer to Opryland Hotel, which is farther away from us. So, yeah, it's going to be a drive out there for something that I'm not super thrilled about, but I'm going.
You're going to the burbs.
I am going to the burbs. I'm not a musical type person. Did you know that?
I do know that because you'll never go to musicals with me.
I don't think you're a musical type person
I'm not.
either.
So we get free tickets, and I'm like, well, let's go see some musicals, right?
Yeah, we last saw Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
And I asked if we could leave in the intermission, and you said no.
They were singing. So we're here in Music City, USA. Laurel can't stand music.
Or concerts. I'm not a concert kind of gal.
No, not at all. But you're going out to see the Rockettes. There will be music behind them, and it's right next to the mall we call Shopryland. Formerly Opryland Amusement Park, now 10 bajillion square feet of shopping experience.
Yeah, I will not be going in there. The Rockettes should be interesting. My friend didn't want to go alone, so I am her plus one. And hey, it'll be a new experience.
This is the Red Podcast. Red stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. We're here to help you build an audience, sell more products, and make more money. Hey, speaking of making more money and the Rockettes, do you think that there is only one group of Rockettes? I bet there are 10 different ones in 10 different cities tonight.
Oh, at least.
Yeah. So maybe franchising. We can help you do that. I want to talk about the school system, the U.S. school system, because I saw something today on the internet. Therefore, you know that it's true. 7-year-old gets told to stop using cursive. This guy's in first grade and signed his name using cursive, which I don't know that they actually even teach cursive anymore. I've heard that they do not. I'm also in my 40s, though. I'm not really into the school system and how it's working and what they're changing.
Don't most people sign their name in cursive, like a signature?
A signature? Yeah, or like a icon like I do. It's kind of more of a symbol than cursive. But this guy signs his name in cursive, and the teacher, or else somebody in an elaborate internet hoax, wrote, "Don't use cursive until the 3rd grade." The father got pissed and had a long diatribe about how the school system is failing people. I think the reason was really for people not progressing at their own level, not going with their own interests and being kind of force-fed what the teacher wants them to know. And you know this, the school system in the United States, it was based on a factory system. That's the reason we have the bells to let you go to the next period, the next class. In the factory, it was to let you know to change stations.
I thought it was so you could get saved by the bell. Is that not it?
No.
Oh. Too bad.
Too bad. Although that does happen. Yeah, nothing to do with boxing or the TV sitcom by the same name.
So what does this have to do with Red and entrepreneurial development, David?
Well, I'll tell you, Laurel, I'm glad you asked. It has to do with the fact that a lot of people think that they need school, and school may be taking you away from what you should be learning and what you want to be learning and actually hindering you from a great career in entrepreneurship. That's the question today. We're going to answer it. Do you need school? Let's talk about our schooling background, because you and I, we both have degrees, 4-year degrees.
We do. And when you say school, you're probably not talking about 3rd grade. You're talking about advanced degrees.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we're talking about like the real world adult type schooling, not primary education of learning how to read, learning how to add. Those things come in handy.
So we're not debating that school system
No,
today.
no. However, cursive, I don't know if you need it or not.
I don't know. Do you use cursive?
No, I haven't used cursive since 5th grade. I gave up on it. It wasn't working for me.
When did you learn chicken scratch? Did they teach that, or was that just kind of...
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. That's you moving ahead with your own thing.
Your own style.
Your own style. Your own progression. Yeah.
Well, tell us your story about your education.
Well, my education, high school graduate, and went on to a 4-year degree studying music, commercial music actually, but I have a Bachelor of Music from University of Memphis. And that's really rare for somebody who worked in the music industry. Oftentimes you see people that are high school dropouts or just a high school diploma, and they start with an internship. They start by apprenticing somebody. And some of the most wealthy people that I know, they did just that. It's very, very rare to see somebody in my situation working in the music industry with an actual music business degree. Although, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, there are a lot of schools that sell that idea. And there are, because of that, a lot of people with music business degrees. As a matter of fact, I think that our barista at the coffee shop yesterday actually had one.
I think everybody in Nashville has one.
Or a taxi cab driver
Yeah.
had a music business degree. And how about you, Laurel?
I graduated high school and got a 4-year engineering degree. So I got my undergraduate and went into the engineering field. So it doesn't really pertain to what I am doing today, but it was a good education as educations go.
And we say this just to make the point that we are not anti-education. There are a lot of things that we learned from going to college. Would you do it again?
Yes and no. I think for me, looking at what I got out of it was that I learned how to learn. I don't think I use any calculus, differential equations, heat transfer, any of that stuff. I'm not using that now, but I did learn how to do problem solving. I learned how to work in a team. I learned how to lead my own team. I learned a lot of skills that I can apply towards what I do today. So in that aspect, I felt like it was really useful. Was it $100,000 useful? I don't know. I think you could have gotten a lot of those same experiences by starting your own company or starting your own business or doing something different. So I'm not sure.
Now, one thing I will say that I learned during my college years that I feel has helped me within the entrepreneurship space, within having my own business, you learn how to get along with people. You learn how to get along with a lot of different kinds of people. You learn how to deal with BS and structure and getting around that structure when you need to. So I think that was helpful. At the same time, I didn't quite spend as much money on my degree as you did. Mine might have been half that, maybe a quarter of that, just a state school, University of Memphis. Whereas Laurel went to Vanderbilt, very, very upper echelon private school. With that said, you can learn a lot having to work within structure and going around it, because I think that has been really, really good for me.
Although if you're looking at the payoff of something, I mean, what right now would you spend $100,000 on that you would expect a bigger payout than I think what we got out of that education?
Well, you could start your own business and get a bigger payout. And that's easier to do for $100,000 now than it would have been 20 years ago when I was in school. That's certainly a possibility for you to spend that kind of money. I think it's important, though, speaking of money, that you do realize that education is a business. I didn't really realize that until I did some consulting for a company. And yes, I do call them a company that was out in the Midwest, actually in Kansas City, Kansas, in the education business. I always thought that, again, going to a state school, I thought there was an element of this is a service. This is a service from the government. These are people that really care about you being educated. And when I saw the behind the closed doors aspects of the business and what they were trying to do to bring students in, it was really quite chilling. I don't know. It just changed my whole concept.
They have to market too.
Well, they do market. And it was crazy because we knew the cost that it took to get a student. We knew what we were having to do, the different media buys that we were having to make, what we had to do to actually sell the benefits to the student. It was kind of amazing. So it's a huge business, and I think that's something to keep in mind, is that These people don't necessarily have your best interest in mind. It's a business just like any other. They want to keep the doors open, the lights on. And I even saw that. Second quick story, when I was running the big music conference in Nashville called Nashville New Music Conference, we had schools that were sponsoring us. And looking at that from the back end, we were trying to offer what I felt was real world education. And we'll get into that here in a second, how you can get the education that you need without going to school. And we did that through a huge conference. We brought in several thousand people each year to learn these skills. It was amazing to me with the straight look on their face that these administrators wouldn't even acknowledge the fact that they were cranking out people semester after semester into an industry that is completely changing and would really dump them into the coffee shop taxi circuit like we mentioned earlier.
I find that a lot of education, I would say most of it, doesn't teach you anything that you need to know on a daily basis. That can range from how to apply for a job to how to cook a healthy meal to how to exercise. I mean, the things that we deal with adults aren't hit on in our education system. And that's kind of sad to me because you get out of the system of education. The world doesn't work in grades and A pluses, Bs, Cs. It doesn't work like that. It works with adding value to the company you work for, or the company you start, or to the marketplace. And the whole school system isn't set up like that. So you go through a system until you're about 22 if you go to college, and then you get dumped out in the real world, which isn't the same at all. So I think it's a little upsetting that we don't really learn anything for the real world.
Absolutely. Grades are just somebody's opinion. And taking it back to the example that I gave earlier about the most established and wealthiest people that I know not having degrees, even high school diplomas, it's weird to see somebody get out of college with a 4.0 average who's having circles run around them by somebody who didn't graduate high school. But I see that all the time. What you learn in school and what you get graded on isn't necessarily what you're going to get graded on, what you need to know outside of school. A minute ago, I mentioned that for $100,000, you could start your own business. Easier today to do that than ever. You could do it for $5,000 or $10,000 probably. And I think those technological advances are a great example of why school is maybe not for you. Everything is changing in the business, and some of the people that are teaching in school, they haven't actually worked in the real world, in the working world, for quite a long period of time. They're teaching old information. I see that happen all the time. It's great in theory, but will it be practical today? Sometimes not.
I was joking around with my mom the other day when we were on a hike. She was a teacher, a mathematics teacher for years since I was born. She's retired now, but I was saying you could have taught those kids anything in mathematics and just done random proofs on the board, and they probably would have believed you. So I think that's just interesting to think about. Teachers just teach what they know, and if they're not up to date and they haven't been in the real world with these experiences, they might not be teaching things that are really relevant for today.
Here's another thing that I've wondered about with the birth of the entrepreneurship degree. Can entrepreneurship be taught? This is something relatively new. Maybe it's too early for us to make this decision, but all the entrepreneurs in the world that are really, really successful, I've never met one of them with an entrepreneurship degree.
It's because it's new.
Well, it could be. I mean, maybe this is the best thing ever, but I really have to wonder, again, taking things back to theory, we talked about this on the last couple of podcasts regarding Project X and what you learned from that. That, to me, is a whole lot more valuable. Going through it, it's actually driving the car rather than reading a book about how to drive a car. Can you learn stuff in theory when it comes to building a business? I don't know, because little things come up that you can't plan for.
I'm not sure how those entrepreneurial programs are structured, but I would say it would be quite effective if at the beginning of a program you came up with an idea of a business that you wanted to launch, and the years that you're in the program, you launch this business, you learn as you go, you take the classes relevant to what you're doing. I think that would be quite effective. If you don't have that hands-on approach, theory is never going to help you. You can study this stuff all day long, But until you dive in and do something, you can't learn it. It's just not possible.
Let me be devil's advocate on this. Let's say you were in an entrepreneurship program. Couldn't you start the business without it? And if you are in an entrepreneurship program, if you are going to college, if you're like a lot of people where your parents are paying for your college, that's still a whole lot different than starting something in the real world where you don't have that backup net.
Well, why do you need that backup net if you can go through the program? I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs these days, they start their business and they enroll in a coaching program or in a mastermind program or get a coach. So how do you see that different than going through an entrepreneurial program in a school?
Well, I think with coaching, I think with a mastermind group where you've got other peers that are with you, that are in the trenches with you, I think apprenticeships, mentorships, I think jumping in, even if it's small, is a completely different thing than worrying about theory and worrying about, hey, is my company going to go public and doing all this stuff on paper? It's kind of like, have you ever seen the guys that do stock trading or they're selling stock trading advice? I go to these seminars all the time, not because I'm interested in stock trading, but when these guys come through town, I want to see the back of room sales, and they'll pull something out on paper and they'll say, hey, here's our stock picking method, and it works. We want you to play on paper before you play with real money. They're just trying to cover themselves so you don't lose everything and blame them. And then you can get in the real world, start playing with real money. But it's like gambling with points as opposed to gambling with real money. It's a different game, and what you have to think about when you're playing with real money is completely different from when you're playing with points, when you're playing with theory. I don't know that the theory is going to work at all.
I just think if you could start a real business at the beginning of an entrepreneurship program in school, then I think that would be really helpful. I know we had to learn everything the hard way, and that's not always the most fun, even though you do learn it.
Well, I started my business when I was still in college. It wasn't associated with the college. I felt that what I was doing in my college was like, it's okay, but I was just kind of playing the game, getting the degree. I didn't feel like it was really going to help me. As a matter of fact, I did a senior project to get out of school before I was allowed to graduate, had to complete that. My advisor told me that it would never work, and that's what I ended up doing for the next 15 or 20 years. So it does work. But I knew that because I was in the trenches doing it all the time, and he was the guy who was the theoretical guy, doing things on paper. Oh, this will never work. So I guess it can work both ways.
I think the bottom line is that you do have to get in the trenches, and that is the only way you're going to learn when what you're learning is relevant to what you're doing. When I was working my engineering job years ago and designing color laser printers, when the new people first got to the company, they set us up learning the 3D modeling program that we had to learn to design the parts. I took these classes, learned 3D modeling, and also learned how to make engineering diagrams of these models that I had created. But at that time, I wasn't making these spec sheets and these diagrams. And so I didn't learn this stuff because I wasn't doing it. And when I actually had to do it about a year down the road, I had remembered none of it because the class wasn't relevant to me at the time. So I think you have to be getting education on things that you're actually working on that are relevant to what you're doing. And that's when you're going to actually input it and practice it and put it into action instead of just talking about theory, forgetting it all, and then trying to do something later where you have to relearn it.
Yeah, that's a great point. We see that all the time with people that we help out, people that we coach. They don't get it when we first explain it to them, but once they have a chance to actually dive in, learn by example, they can come and we can tweak those things, and they say, oh, yeah, now I know what you were talking about. So let's talk about some ways to get some real-world education in entrepreneurship if you are not going to go to college. And it's not something that I would recommend. I think you should always jump in, even if you are going to college and going to supplement yourself with a 4-year degree. First of all, jump in, even if it's small. You'll learn a lot from even having a lemonade stand or an Etsy shop or an eBay store.
I agree with that advice, David. I think getting real-world experience is priceless when it comes to being an entrepreneur. I mean, when did you start your first business? Probably when you were little, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was selling things at school in the 5th or 6th grade. That was my gun show business, my knife business.
Ah, yes.
Buying cheap Japanese, Chinese knives, think they were $1.50. I sold them for $20. Nice margin there.
I couldn't do that at an all-girls school because no one would care.
I wasn't supposed to be doing it at my school, but here we are. Mentorships. There's a great site. You know this site, Laurel, Micro Mentor. If you're looking for a mentor, you can actually find somebody in the trenches who's willing to give you advice for free. So if you're out working on something, there are plenty of great people that are willing to help you. And if you know something, you can also mentor people, which will make you better at explaining ideas and show you where you are. I think that can be helpful as well.
Another thing you can do is apprenticeships. That's something I did back in the day when I wanted to do photography. I found a photographer in town to work with, to assist for the summer. And that was a great experience. It gets you learning things even when it's not your business. Getting behind the scenes on somebody else's business is quite helpful.
We talked about this on the last episode, Red Podcast number 93. It's at redpodcast.com/93. I had an intern who outworked my key employee. She got the job. Internships and apprenticeships are wonderful for learning a skill. It's also a great way to get in with people and either start something new or get hired. I think right now with self-publishing, there are a lot of books that are coming out quickly. They are updated frequently, and you can get them instantly. There's some great books on entrepreneurship. And as a matter of fact, in a couple episodes, Red Podcast number 96, we're going to talk about our favorite entrepreneurship books. If you're interested, that will be at redpodcast.com/96. Home study courses, meetups. There are a lot of great ways to meet other entrepreneurs, learn from them, get connected, and work on those skills that I said are really important. Things that will let you meet, connect, and learn how to deal with different kinds of people. Also, things that will put you in different situations in which you have to move your company forward. If you have any questions, you have any comments about this subject, is school necessary? You want advice from me and Laurel how to get into your best college?
I don't think I'd ask that.
Or not. We're available at redpodcast.com. There you will find direct contact information for us, as well as past episodes of Red Podcast. You can help us build the Red Podcast community by telling a friend about this episode, about this show. Again, redpodcast.com is the best place to find us, but you can also find us at iTunes. And while you're there, if you can leave us a review, that will help us to come up more frequently in the iTunes search engines. When more people find us, we build a bigger community. Everybody's helped out, and we can all help each other in the way that we are just speaking about here on this episode. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Red Podcast.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.